things are going to get a little bit weird in today's Mr. Ballen reaction, I reckon, because he's found true glitches in the Matrix. What does he mean by this? Is this going to be strange and mysterious things that happen to people that could be misconstrued as glitches in the Matrix? Or are they just coincidence? I don't even know why I'm guessworking, because I don't even know what this video is about. Anyway, we know that someone's going to die, probably. But if you like these videos, then please hit like and subscribe. It supports me and it supports the channel, and I do appreciate it very, very much. Don't forget to follow Mr. Ballen as well. He's absolutely brilliant at storytelling. Okay, let's get it. When it works. Hang on a minute.
Today, I'm going to share 3 stories that should never have happened.
Okay.
Like, the things that happen in these stories feel impossible.
That looks old.
They defy everything we know about mathematics and probability, but they are all completely true.
Right.
Which proves to all of us that extraordinary, truly improbable events can happen at any moment.
Right,
but
okay.
Before we get into today's stories,
what are we going to do to the like button?
If you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload 2, 3, even 4 times every week.
Right.
So, if that's of interest to you, the next time you're at the like button's house, go ahead and secretly switch out their spray-on deodorant for hairspray. Also, please subscribe to our channel.
Oh, now is the like button a man with hairy armpits, or is a like button a girl who shaves her armpits? Because the hairspray won't really do much difference to a girl, will it? But to a man, all his hair will stick together, and that'll be uncomfortable and itchy. Let's go.
Turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads.
You could have said carpet glue.
Let's get into today's stories.
The 13th floor, let's go.
Around noon on October 21st, 1988, a man named Valentino sat at a cafe table sipping a coffee on a sidewalk in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Right.
So this particular neighborhood was called Caballito, and it was right in the heart of Buenos Aires. It was very densely populated, and there were lots of tall apartment buildings and shops and cafes, with tons of pedestrians and tons of traffic. And so as a result, it often felt very loud and chaotic, and today was no different.
Like New York.
Valentino, despite the craziness all around him, he still wanted to try to find a moment of peace as he had his coffee. And so he sort of sat back in his chair and he just looked up at the sky above all the urban noise, and he took this deep, calming breath. And as he did this, he saw a few birds fly by, and he just kind of smiled to himself, watching them fly on. But then he saw something else. Out of the corner of his eye, just across the street, he saw a flash of something brown plummeting towards the ground in front of a tall apartment building.
Looks like a big shit.
And so Valentino turned his attention to look and see what this thing was. But what he saw didn't make any sense. There was this one old woman on the other side of the street who had stopped on the sidewalk, and she was staring down at what appeared to be like a pile of clothes at her feet. And the brown thing, the thing that caught Valentino's attention, which he couldn't make out what it was just a few feet away from this pile in front of this woman. But then this old woman across the street, she just began screaming. And that's when Valentino realized that what he thought was like a pile of clothes at her feet was actually like a person, like a heap of a person on the ground. It was another old woman, and she was completely motionless on the ground. And so Valentino, he's shocked by what he's seeing. He's trying to make sense of it, and he's seeing again now, knowing it's a person on the ground and seeing this brown thing over here, and he's thinking, was that flash of brown, like that brown thing falling and striking this woman who's now motionless on the ground? Is that what happened? And as Valentino is sort of coming up with theories about what he's even looking at, it seemed like at the same time, the entire bustling neighborhood all around him also, just for a moment, stopped and just sort of paid attention to whatever madness was happening over there, as they too were trying to piece together what happened. But then, that brief moment of almost relative calm just completely dissipated, and the street once again descended into total chaos. Passerby and locals started shouting and racing over to the woman on the ground to help her, and very quickly this woman and the other woman who was screaming was completely surrounded by this huge crowd.
Where's it going?
And Valentino, for his part, he felt very shaken by what he was seeing, and just thinking about the fact that he might have seen effectively this woman get destroyed by whatever this brown thing was. He did see that flash of brown, and so he's sort of traumatized, and he's also, he's thinking he doesn't want to contribute to the the pandemonium over there by running over to join the massive throng of people trying to figure out what happened. And so instead, he just stayed at his cafe table, with his coffee, and just watched as this crowd continued to build across the road. Finally, Valentino heard sirens, and he knew that meant an ambulance had to be close. But for some reason, even though he knew that was like objectively a good thing, help was on the way, maybe they can save this woman on the ground, he doesn't know. Even though he felt like he should feel relieved now that professionals are gonna show up, they're gonna clear the crowd, they're gonna handle this, he just couldn't calm down. Like he literally couldn't stop. Like his heart was racing, his pulse was racing, his stomach was in knots. I mean, he felt terrible. It was like he was completely reliving this trauma that he's just experienced over and over and over again.
So
as soon as
overthinking
the
it a bit,
ambulance came into view and parked, the mass of people saw them and right away parted to let the paramedics come through to try to help this woman. And Valentino, from across the road, he was craning his neck to try and see, what was happening. And as he did, he saw this middle-aged woman who he didn't know crossing the street in the direction of this scene over there. And she just looked like she was just curious. And as she's crossing the road, she got destroyed by a city bus. It plowed directly into her, and she immediately disappeared underneath the bus's wheels. And so Valentino, whose heart was already basically beating out of his chest, he was so
tragedies in one day.
Everything, he shot to his feet like, what is going on here? Screams erupted from all around him, from other people who had seen the same horrible thing.
This is like describing like Final Destination shit, this, isn't it? You know what I mean? People getting killed left, right, and centre under a bus. How's my driving and all that crap?
From all around him, from other people who had seen the same horrible thing. And he could feel his heart just like racing nonstop, and sweat began dripping down his back. He was almost dizzy with shock, and he began to stagger away from his table, looking frantically around, calling out for somebody to actually help him. Like it was like his body couldn't handle what he was seeing. But nobody came because there were so many other things happening, horrible things that demanded immediate attention from other people that no one's paying attention to Valentino having, a panic attack here. Like he's so low on the priority list. And so as he's sort of fumbling around the cafe, trying to get someone to help calm him down, nobody's paying attention to him. And so eventually Valentino kind of spiraled and then fell to the ground, and he found himself once more, on his back on the ground, staring up at the sky, watching birds fly across. What actually happened on that street in 1988 in Buenos Aires was so improbable that it made newspapers all across the world. So the first woman who was hit by the object that fell from the sky, the flash of brown, she died from the impact. And then that woman, the middle-aged woman who crossed the road to see what was going on, who got hit by the bus, she also died. And Valentino, who witnessed this entire thing, was so stunned and so horrified that he actually had a heart attack. And then he died on his way to the hospital.
Jesus Christ!
And so basically, these three fatalities that all occurred within minutes of each other were all connected, but were basically freak accidents that all had to happen in succession to even occur.
Damn.
And it all started when that brown thing plummeted through the air, the thing that caught Valentino's eye. And it would turn out that brownish object was actually the fourth victim in this tragedy. That object was actually a poodle named Khaki that had chased a ball straight off the balcony of its owner's 13th floor.
What? 13th floor. 13th floor. 13. There's your glitch in the Matrix. I mean, it's all caused by a dog. Dog comes down, hits a woman, kills the woman. The woman's distracted walking across the road, gets hit by a bus. Valentino sees everything happen and dies of an heart attack. That's the whole story just described in 2 seconds. I mean, what is going on? That's ridiculous. It's fucking strange. It's not just one person died in this Mr. Vaughn video. Three. Once again, 3 more people will die. That dog jumping out of a window reminds me of something about Mary when Ben Stiller throws the ball through the window and it jumps out. Always said poodles are evil. They are, man. They are. Once again. Where's this going?
At 3 a.m. on Sunday, December 24th, 1967.
Christmas Eve.
26-year-old Sammy Brown Jr. sped in his car down a road called Seal Road in Phoenix City, Alabama. with a police siren blaring right behind him.
Right.
So Sammy was in trouble. It was Christmas Eve, and he had celebrated a little too hard and drank way too much. And he thought he'd be okay
Never
to
drink
drive
and drive,
home
kids.
since he lived close by, but he'd been wrong. And he'd ultimately attracted the attention of a police officer who was now chasing him. And Sammy knew he could not get caught because in addition to being very drunk, he also didn't even have a license to drive in the first place. And so that's why right now he was driving at 100 miles an hour to get away from this cop.
Wow.
But not only was the cop actually gaining on him, but also Sammy could see on the road up ahead that he had another problem because there was another car in front of him driving in the same direction.
At the speed limit.
Because this other car was actually going the speed limit, Sammy was going to smash into them if he didn't swerve around them. But this was not a highway where Sammy could just easily change lanes. It was a local 2-lane road. So Sammy knew that if he wanted to swerve around this car, he would have to swerve into the oncoming traffic lane. But since Sammy kind of looked and didn't see any other cars in that lane, he just decided to go for it and pray that he got lucky. So Sammy cut his wheel and tried to swerve around the slow
straight
car.
into a truck or something.
But again, Sammy is extremely drunk. He's being chased by this cop who's gaining on him, so his anxiety is spiking. He's going so fast. And in this state of mind, Sammy actually misjudged the timing of his swerve, and he clipped the back of the slower car. And as soon as he did, there was this crunch of metal, and both cars began to spin out across the road before they sort of miraculously just came to a stop. Inside of his own car, Sammy sort of sat
like
up
a destruction
and looked around
derby.
and realized he was unhurt. And then when he looked out the window, he could see the driver of the other car, a man in his 60s, slowly get out and walk to his bumper to inspect the damage. And when Sammy saw this, he realized that despite how bad of a situation he was in, he actually had gotten very lucky.
Yeah.
Not only was he alive, but the man he had just hit going nearly 100 miles an hour
That's
also
crazy.
appeared to not just be alive, but basically seemed okay.
People who normally crash at 100 miles an hour don't live to tell the tale, do they? So he's extremely lucky. I mean, cars might have been more robust and like massively shielded compared to today's cars, because today's cars crumple like bloody paper, don't they? You know what I mean?
Following the crash, Sammy expected to have some pretty harsh consequences. And he was charged for reckless driving and also driving without a license. But
Drink
sort of
driving?
amazingly, his lucky streak actually would continue because despite the charges, he didn't actually have to serve any jail time.
Right.
He just had to pay a couple of fines, which meant Sammy really did not learn his lesson.
No.
And so over a year later, on
Back in
April
his car,
13th,
is he?
1969, Sammy once again spent all of his Saturday night drinking, and then at about 1:30 a.m. on Sunday morning, he got into that same car, which he still did not have a license to drive.
You can't do
and
that.
then he once again sped down Seal Road, the same road he got arrested on last December. And wouldn't you know it, just like the last time, he saw a car ahead of him in his lane going too slow, and he decided to go around it. This time, however, he was not being chased by police, so he was not nearly as frantic or anxious. So he began shifting lanes much further away from this slower
Yeah, I
car.
learned that lesson then.
When he moved into the opposing traffic lane, because of the distance he had given himself, he didn't clip the car in front of him. And for a split second, he felt an intense rush of satisfaction, because this was just more proof to Sammy that he was just an incredibly lucky guy. However, before Sammy could drive his car back into the correct lane, he went around a curve in the road and was immediately blinded by a searing bright light. Then there was a deafening bang, and Sammy's car jerked to the side, and all he saw was a violent swirl of motion as his car again spun around and around.
Is it something coming on him, hasn't it?
Stop. For a few moments, Sammy just sat there, feeling completely
Coming
stunned.
on to him.
I mean, again, he's gotten into a high-speed wreck, and he's sort of taking stock of, did he even survive? But after a few moments, he realized he definitely had lived. His neck ached quite a bit from being shaken so hard, but other than that, he kind of looked around and he realized once again he
Basically
was
okay.
unhurt. So he had just gotten
Superhuman.
really lucky again. And so eventually he climbed out of his car, and even though he was sort of dizzy from the crash, from the alcohol, when he took stock of what was in front of him, he could immediately see what had just happened. In his effort to avoid hitting the car that was driving in the same lane as him,
Yeah, there's a car
he
coming
had
towards him.
swerved into oncoming traffic and hit a different car, another car, head on, that was driving in the opposite direction.
Double
this
impact.
was like a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And both his car and the one he had hit were completely destroyed,
Of course.
with the fronts completely smashed in. It was truly a miracle Sammy had walked out of that car. And so Sammy, he staggered over to look at the other car and see if the other driver and, potential passengers were okay. When he staggered over there, when he looked inside of the wreckage, he could not believe what he saw. Because what he saw inside was yet another miraculous stroke of luck.
Go on.
Only this time, it was not the good kind. Sammy had somehow managed to do something that really should have been impossible. He had almost perfectly recreated the accident that he had had a year earlier.
Yeah.
He was driving the same car, going down the same road on the same day of the week.
Did he hit the same
and he
car,
had
the same
crashed
driver?
for basically the exact same reasons. And then when Sammy looked inside of the car he hit head on, he realized there was one more truly just incredible coincidence. The driver of this car was the same driver
way.
as the car he hit a year earlier.
No
the man's
way, on
name
the
was
same
Francis
road?
Patterson. He was 65 years old, and he didn't even live in Phoenix City where this crash happened. It was just a wild coincidence.
Massive
that
coincidence.
2 times, more than a year apart, Sammy had hit him while driving drunk
But
on
he
Seal
fucking
Road.
hates Sammy, that
The
guy.
only difference this second time around was Francis died from the
Oh,
crash. Following this
damn.
tragedy, Sammy Brown Jr. was charged with driving while intoxicated and also involuntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 12 months in prison.
Is that it? You get more than that these days for, hurting someone, never mind killing him. He got 12 months. I think he is a plum pudding. That's the next one. I mean, Jesus Christ. How mad's that? How mad is it hitting the same car with the same driver on the same road and practically a year later when the guy didn't even live there? That is madness, man. That is madness. Plum pudding. That's what Sammy is.
On a Sunday night in early 1805, a
Wow,
13-year-old
going back.
boy named Emile Deschamps sat at a table full of adults in a house in Orléans, France. Now, Emile was supposed to be having dinner with all the other boys at his boarding school across the city. But his aunt had picked him up as a surprise for a home-cooked meal.
Right.
And he knew why. His aunt was worried about him. So Emile's parents had sent him to this boarding school in Orléans a few years ago, but he hated the city, and basically right after he got there, his mother had died. And so Emile had really had a difficult time adjusting, and he felt lonely and isolated, and his aunt was definitely aware of that. And so tonight, Emile was very grateful that his aunt, because, she kind of felt bad for him, had brought him here to include him in this dinner, like he appreciated that.
Yeah.
But this particular dinner was just full of adults that he didn't know, and it was just incredibly boring. In fact, right now, one of his aunt's middle-aged friends, this guy whose name was Monsieur Foncier, was just rambling on and on about his experience in the military, and, Emile was just not remotely interested.
No.
This was not exciting to him in the least, and so he did what he always did, just sort of tune this guy out and let his mind wander. Because Emile had this really big imagination, and he would routinely, especially when he was, lonely and sad at school, he would just kind of disappear into his own thoughts. But quickly, after he sort of began letting his mind wander, he was pulled right back to reality when his aunt set the dessert down right in the middle of the table. So this dessert was a brown, sauce-drenched cake-like thing that was actually wrapped in a cloth and was
plum
piping
pudding.
hot, literally steam coming off of it. And Emile, he just kind of stared at it because he had never seen a dessert like this before and had no idea what it was. And so as he was staring at it, he heard a voice at the table say, "Oh, it was plum pudding, and Emile, you should try this." Emile looked over at the voice who had said this, and it belonged to Monsieur de Fontainebleau, who was smiling at him. This is the guy who had been rambling about
military.
his military
Yeah.
experience. And the Monsieur repeated that Emile really needed to try a slice of this plum pudding, because it was an amazing traditional English dessert and it was just absolutely delicious. So Emile let his aunt cut him a slice and then he took a bite. And he was glad he did, because it really was incredible. It was this rich and sweet.
This is going to be the plum pudding that kills somebody, because it's Mr. Barlin. How is a plum pudding going to kill someone unless they're allergic?
Perfectly warm dessert. I mean, this was like one of the best desserts he had ever had. And so after trying this plum pudding and, telling the monsieur how great it was and thanking his aunt, he just kind of went back to letting his mind wander, and the conversation at the table picked back up again, and it was just boring adult talk, and the night just kind of continued as is. And then at some point in the night, when the meal and the dessert and everything had all been eaten up, the guests parted ways, and Emile went back to his boarding school. And quickly, when he got back to his boarding school, he forgot about the dinner and the pudding and the monsieur, and just carried on with his life.
As you would.
One afternoon, 10 years later, in the spring of 1815, Emile was 23 years old, and he was living in Paris, about 80 miles away from Orléans. So Emile had basically fled Orléans as soon as he was old enough to strike out on his own. And once he had turned his big imagination into a blossoming career. He was now a poet and a playwright, and he was writing about these big, sweeping human experiences like love and chaos and how mysterious life can be. So Emile that day had basically been writing nonstop and had sort of lost track of time and sort of forgot to eat. And then suddenly he felt super hungry. And so now here he was out and about looking for something to eat. But he was so hungry that he decided he didn't even care where he went. I mean, normally he was picky about where he would eat lunch and dinner, but today he just wanted food. He didn't care where it was.
Okay.
And so he just randomly chose a cafe and went inside. It was a small space with a few customers sitting at some tables, and Emile just walked in and took a seat at an empty one. And quickly thereafter, a waitress came over and handed Emile a menu, and when he flipped it open, he was immediately drawn to the dessert section.
Plum pudding.
He saw this cafe served plum pudding.
Right, okay.
An amazing English dessert that he had had a decade earlier at that dinner party with his aunt.
Okay, where's it going, this, Mr. Barlin?
He had not had plum pudding from that day to now. It had been 10 years. He had just not had it, but he saw it on the menu, and he's like, oh my goodness, I gotta have plum pudding again. That was so good 10 years ago. I gotta have that experience again. And so Emile asked this waitress if he can have a slice of their plum pudding. And she just shook her head and said, I'm sorry, but the last piece we had, I actually just served it to the guy over there. Like, we don't have any more. And the waitress, she saw Emile react to this, and he was like so distraught. He's like, oh man, really? Like, there's no more? Are you serious? And the waitress could sense, like, he really, really wanted this plum pudding. And so she goes, well, hold on a minute. And she turns and she calls out to the gentleman that she had actually just given the last piece to, who was sitting in the corner of the cafe. And she calls to him and says, hey, would you mind sharing that last piece with this new guest here, with Emile? Because he wants a piece of this plum pudding.
No, because Joey doesn't share food. That's what I'd be saying. No, it's mine. No. If he pays for a lot of it, I'll share it with him. Gives me the money for the worth of the cake.
Piece with this new guest here, with Emile, because he wants a piece of this plum pudding. And so Emile, he kind of looks around the waitress in the direction of the person that she's speaking to, the guy with the actual plum pudding. And the guy who's sitting over there, he looks up, and wouldn't you know it, it's Monsieur de Fontainebleau, the same guy who was at the dinner party 10 years earlier, who encouraged Emile to eat plum pudding for the first time and only time in his whole life at that point.
No way.
It's the same guy. Like, they're not even in Orléans, France. They're 80 miles away in Paris. And Emile, he's chosen
this is Sammy all over
cafe.
again.
He'd never been here before, and he just happened to see plum pudding on the menu. Like, what are the odds that it's the same guy and they're having plum pudding? Like, the coincidence here is just unbelievable.
The odds could be narrowed, though, if that's the only cafe that actually serves plum pudding. Do you know what I mean? Because it's an English dish. And if there's not many places that serve it, that makes the odds a little bit shorter that you would meet each other. You know what I mean?
And so Emile, he sort of says to the waitress, hold on a minute, I know him. And so Emile, he gets up and walks over to the monsieur, and he sits down next to him. And they're both like this is crazy. It's been 10 years.
Yeah, man.
And here we are eating plum pudding together again. Like, what are the odds? And so for the next 15 minutes or so, the two men just caught up about their respective lives. They ate this plum pudding. And then at the end of it, they were like, all right, like, great, nice
See
to
you
see
around.
you. And they both just went their separate ways, with the Monsieur going back to whatever he does and Emile going back to his writing. 38 years later, at 6 p.m. on a winter evening in 1853, Emile sat at a tea party in Paris.
38 years later.
As he chatted with the other guests at his table. He'd been invited to this party by the hostess, who was a big admirer of his work. And there were actually a lot of people like that these days.
Okay.
Emile was now in his 60s, and he was very well known. He'd published tons of plays and poems and translations, and he was close friends with many of the literary giants of France and Europe. Like,
Okay.
he had made it as a creative. And so as Emile is sitting at this table, basically being lauded for, all of his achievements and what an incredible writer he was, as he's just sitting there basking in the glory, one of the hostess's staff came in with a platter of dessert. And Emile, he looked over and he saw what the dessert
Plum
was.
pudding.
And right away, he knew he had to have some. It was plum pudding. And so as the staff person came over with the plum pudding to give to Emile, he sort of laughed and told, the staff person and the people at his table the story of how, over the course of his life,
Pontified.
he'd only had plum pudding 2 times, when he was 13 and when he was 23. And in both of those situations, when he had had plum pudding, this guy, Monsieur de Fontainebleau, had been present. This
Right.
man that he didn't know and had only interacted with when he was eating
He
plum
can't
pudding.
still be
It was
alive
kinda
if this
this
guy's
crazy
60 odd.
coincidence. He described seeing him 10 years later in Paris. He couldn't believe it. That was 38 years ago, but still, it's like this wild coincidence, the biggest one of his whole life. And so he sort of jokingly told the people at the table and the staff, like, hey, here I am about to eat for the 3rd time plum pudding. We better be on the lookout for the Monsieur. He's bound to show up. And everyone kind of laughed. They're like, yeah, that's crazy. And so Emile, he gets his plate of plum pudding. He gets his fork and he scoops a bite and he's about to eat it when the butler walks into the room and announces that there is going to be one more guest joining them at this tea party. And who walks in, this additional guest? None other than Monsieur de Fontainebleau. And so Emile, he's about to bite the plum pudding, and he looks up, and he sees him, and he can't believe it.
Get
The
out.
guy is like 1,000 years old, and he hasn't seen him for 38 years, and the only other times are when he's eating plum pudding.
Get out.
And wouldn't you know it, for the 3rd time here, it's happening again.
No
this
way.
is unbelievable. It was crazy the 2nd time. This is now impossible. How is it that he's here as I'm about to eat for the 3rd time this plum pudding? It doesn't make sense. And so Emile just stared at the Monsieur with this look of just absolute shock on his face.
If he sat there at the table going, fuck off, I've just told this story in his opinion, what's going on? Is he stalking me? Is he the only guy in the world who makes plum pudding and his condition for making it for people is that he has a bite of it and every time I've seen it, he's been there? Or is he following me, lurking in the shadows?
Just stared at the Monsieur with this look of just absolute shock on his face. And the Monsieur, as he walked in, he sort of stopped and scanned the room, and he eventually met eyes with Emile, and he had this look of just total confusion on his face.
Yeah.
He's looking at Emile, he's seeing the plum pudding that he's eating, kind of, scoping out
Can
the
we
whole
share
room.
it? No.
And then the Monsieur, he just turned around and he walked away. It would turn out Monsieur de Fontainebleau had been invited to another party on the same floor and had mistakenly wandered into
the wrong
Emile's
party?
at the exact moment he was being served plum pudding for the
Wow.
3rd time in his entire life. This was truly just an astounding set of coincidences
That's
over
ridiculous.
a 50-year period. Like, the odds of this all happening exactly as it did those 3 different times he had plum pudding and there was the Monsieur.
I'm
For
not
things
having
to
it.
line up that way, it was just staggering to imagine how perfectly each coincidence had to line up.
I'm
was
not
just-
having it.
It was almost so much that Emile felt like, there's got to be something else going on here. This can't just be coincidence. It was just like too much. And so, in fact, Emile would go on to recount his plum pudding and the Monsieur
Wow.
story many, many times to his friends in literary circles, and he would
3
ultimately write
times.
about it in his eventual memoir. Today, it's been around 200 years since the plum pudding events took place. And during that time, Emil's account has been dissected countless times by
I've
probability
never had a plum
experts,
pudding either.
scientists, and mathematicians from all around the world.
Don't even
And
know what it
nobody
is.
has a good answer for how this could have happened. And so in the end, Emil's account about what happened to him actually ended up becoming the foundation for a very famous philosophical concept pioneered by Carl Jung called synchronicity. Synchronicity basically means that some coincidences might not actually be coincidences. They might not be random at all, but instead are actually connected to a much larger meaning or purpose, even if we don't know what that is.
It'd be like, you know, I just can't get rid of this guy. Every time I go to have my dessert, the guy is fucking there. He is there. He is following me, he's hounding me every time I have plum pudding. That's gotta do your head in, that, hasn't it? You know what I mean? How did this happen? I mean, the other two stories, the guy in the car was just an absolute idiot. Absolute idiot. And the first one was just crazy. Like a Final Destination film, the way it was being portrayed, with a dog falling out, killing the woman, and the woman getting hit by the thing, then the guy having an heart attack because he's seen it all. Crazy. Does the Matrix really exist, you think? I'll have to ask Mr. Anderson. That guy knows his shit, doesn't he? But yeah. Confusing. At least nobody died in the last one. And I can't believe that Mr. Pontefieux, whatever his name was still alive after 53 years. He was old as fuck anyway, weren't he? Crazy. Oh my God. Hey, what did you guys think of these stories? Let me know in the comments. I'm skeptical. I'm so skeptical. And if you want to subscribe here too, I would appreciate it very, very much. Right, I'm going. I'll see you on the next video.